You're listening to the Adventuring Party for the third week of July 2024. This week, are you frustrated? The party are too, and ranting about it is probably the same as helping. The Adventuring Party discussing tabletop and radio gaming the Irish way. Welcome to the party. I'm Warlord Scarr, tireless reducer of hit point totals.
And I'm Dave.
And we're here today to talk about when the combat in your RPG just gets a little bit.
Well, we've all been there, I think.
Yeah, a lot of combats. Like you're going to get all kinds of opinions about combat in RPGs. Some people just say, "Oh, ban all combat, narrative consequences for everything." But narrative is combat is a very engaging part of most games, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere. And usually, in most games, it goes reasonably well most of the times. But you're always going to get those fights. At a certain point, whether it's because of mechanics or it's because of the setup, you're going to get those situations where things are starting to drag or just not going the way you're hoping, and it can really put a damper on an evening's gaming. I recently had a situation in a game where a high-level party of D&D-esque adventurers wandering around this dungeon, and they find a room full of trolls. First to think, it's 3 trolls, cool, we'll just beat them up and then set them on fire later, it'll be fine. And then the other 7 trolls came out of the room. And all of a sudden you've got 10 of these things coming out of the rooms. These are 50 hit points and regaining 5 hit points its turn. And the party are just looking through their lists of magic items saying, I don't have any fireballs here. And now we're facing down this situation of, I guess we just have to pick one troll, beat it to death, occasionally one of us has to stab it again to stop getting back up, and then just grind through these trolls as they're continually healing and then lightly mauling us because they're such high level that most party members are basically never going to get hit. And it's just you as a GM, you're very quickly staring down the barrel of, this is going to be like a 10-round fight, and every time they miss attack, whatever, every time they roll low for damage, and then it's the trolls go and they heal all their hit points back. And so eventually it got to the point where they had just enough fire spells. They pointed at the biggest, meanest troll, and I kept rolling morale checks because fire is the one thing trolls are afraid of. And I finally troll fails morale check with 2 hit points left, and the trolls mostly leg. And I just was that tremendously realistic? It was for the good of the game, I think, to say, yeah, let's take this result as opposed to the long drawn out result. And then the next session was an entertaining romp as they went around the dungeon looking for fire magic or some other way to stop the trolls from attacking them again, so they could get into the room and get what they wanted. And that was fine. But the session before that, there was just this looming cloud of dread over the whole proceedings as you're looking for an out to get past this long, sloggy piece of work.
I mean, I can see that. It's a lot, I mean, regenerating enemies can be a little frustrating at the best of times, but I'm curious to kind of look at what actually went awry there, like the mechanics, the setup, player decisions.
I assume it's mainly just this module was set up with the assumption that it's going to be this high-level party of typical AD&D adventures. The assumption is that either they're going to have a wand of fireballs or some other resource of fire magic that they can, focus down the trolls quickly enough while presumably a whole bunch of hirelings get mauled to death protecting the wizards. Or module designer assumed, okay, this is an optional part of the dungeon. You don't need to worry about it. So it's okay if the player party can't fight these trolls. They'll just have to work around them, which is fine, but like not very helpful in the moment when the players have using their weird combination of Ponzi scheme and knife salesmanship had tricked their way into the room to try to negotiate with the trolls before starting the fight. The module designer can make assumptions about the situation and say what's most likely to happen, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee things are going to go in a certain way.
Yeah, yeah, I can hear that. Like sometimes it is a mechanics issue.
Yeah, like I'd say there's also just mechanics of because they're using an early D&D inspired system, player damage is relatively constrained. Like they've gotten way stronger over the course of the things, but they're still rarely doing more than 10 damage a turn. And that's fine if they're fighting a couple of monsters. They can grind down one or two of the monsters each turn. That works fine. But when the trolls are basically keeping everyone apart and they're not able to focus properly and this and that, it becomes a different procedure.
It does sound very grindy, unfortunately so. Another example, like another set of examples that comes to mind, are the Warhammer 40k D100 RPGs, where a lot of them had evasion rolls that were based, based on dodge or parry in the later systems, and they could entirely negate an attack. And yeah, that's quick to resolve, absolutely, but it also means right. So you could have situations where like veteran space marines, or with huge weapon skills or ballistic skills or launching attacks, and those attacks are always missing because like the enemies have, well, they keep making their dodge rolls. And I did notice Dark Heresy Second Edition brought in talents that brought penalties to dodge, for as talents. So for single attack, so a sniper could actually have a decent chance of, or a sharpshooter could have a decent chance of landing hits in combat as with their one attack a turn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is sort of a development throughout the life cycle of the 40k RPGs, where they started off, as I said, with this slow, like as high level players got up and they started having multiple attacks, and then you would get the counterbalance of multiple dodges or multiple parries a turn, and then as the power level escalated over the course of the thing, those became go to talents, and therefore at a certain level you would just have, well, I swing at you three times, well, I dodge three times, or figure out different ways to try to wear down someone's reactions or take them completely by surprise. So, to avoid the very Dragon Ball Z things where like there's 100 punches going around the battlefield, but no one's really being hurt.
Yeah, it's not great if you get a few rounds of swing, miss, shoot, miss. Going back and forth because the PCs are also going to have decent, ways to negate attacks.
Yeah, yeah, and considering how deadly combat can be in those games, you understand why people build characters that way, but it's still you still get this frustrating point of, well, the enemy has to be built sensibly and the players are built sensibly, and all these very sensibly built characters are just like two rubber balls bouncing off each other. And do we want that? Are we looking for those times where I roll my like 11 on my 126 weapon skill, and finally after 10 turns the Dark Elder warlord finally rolls a 93 in their dodge and actually takes a wound and explodes? Is that the playstyle we want? And I don't think they did because, as we've seen, as we've passed over to the
Imperium Maledictum.
that's the name of the RPG, but what was the company? But
Oh
yeah,
yes.
they have their their Age of Sigmar and Wrath and Glory system, which is very much more based around mowing down enemies in spades. But when they we invited the D100 systems, there's a much bigger emphasis on opposed rolls. So instead of having someone having 10 attacks, they're going to have one attack, but it's generally going to be higher baseline than equivalent character in previous iterations, and then it would be compared against dodge roll or reaction roll of the enemy, and it's the comparison between those, so you don't get a situation where the person with 90 weapon skill can't hit the person with 50 weapon skill because they just keep rolling well in their parry checks. Now it is, well, I have a plus 40 advantage, so I'm almost definitely either going to score clean hits or I'm going to build up so much advantage using advantage systems from Wolfrup that I just push through a perfect hit and end this fight. But yeah, that's sort of that's a mechanicals issue that was developed over the course of, and let's be real here, that this is coming on 20 years since Dark Heresy was first released. So that's game design in a nutshell. I do think it's interesting that we're both noticing this problems in what I might call older iterations of games that had a different paradigm, as it were. Eventually, the combat issues over multiple different games, multiple different scenarios. The combat issues with 40k have been with the 40k and Wolfram RPGs has been improved to a place where the modern designers are much happier with it. But here's me looking back at a more old school game system. It's unclear what the intended exit strategy for a frustrating combat was, because these games tend to have harder runaway rules, or unless you're like building up potions and wands or other go big explosion um, blowout. We have to win this fight, otherwise it'll take all evening. Mechanics. If you don't have those, then very often you as a GM will be sitting there looking at your fearless trolls, not in the side but worried about having their heads cut off. And the players will be looking at the card sheets of perfectly optimized for non-healing monsters, and like basically it's you staring at them and them staring at you, and each side hoping that some genius solution will come out of the ether. But sometimes you just have to take the reins and just sort of declare, well, okay, I'm going to start rolling fear checks every time they remember that they have like 2 fire spells.
Which also sounds less than ideal.
Again, a lot of these problems I feel wouldn't have been as much problems for a typical quote unquote party of the situation, because an older, like a 1970s 1980s party would have invested more in having a balanced set of tools to deal with common encounters. They would have made sure that their wizard had some scrolls of fireball, or that they had ability to like build a barrier and just pour flaming oil on top of the trolls, or something like that. Where a modern party more used to sort of jumping in both feet first might not have had that strategy. The other problem was, again, there wasn't this expectation that every piece of the dungeon was mandatory. There was just this section is the troll section. There is X thousand gold pieces or X mausoleums or whatever in there, and if they really really want, they can have the big grinding combat with the trolls, but otherwise they can just move along and find the rest of the dungeon. There wasn't a assumption of having to complete everything, and that paradigm isn't something that people back then thought to communicate, because it was so very obvious to them. Although obviously you don't have to complete all the dungeon, that would make no sense. So they never, brought into things of like, well, what are the players are used to doing everything that's in front of them.
Yeah, I mean, if you're used to clearing out entire levels and entire dungeons, why wouldn't you do that? Like,
I mean, I've had similar issues with other D&D games in the past. Actually, not just D&D. A lot of Savage Worlds has this problem too. So I'll talk about the thing where frustrated when the enemies are too tough or too tanky or too evasive, or what have you, and the slippery nature of the combat, or you can't really engage with how to find a mechanic solution very efficiently. So you end up sort of looking around for non-mechanic solutions. But then there's the inverse problem where, let's just say, I shot the villain in the head. I got first initiative. I shoot the villain in the head, and they've crit failed all their damage soak rolls, and that's half the fight gone. Oh well, I guess it's not going to be evening and entertainment as you swashbuckle around this cool set piece. I guess the boss is dead and everyone runs away. Like I said, this has happened. This happens a lot in D&D. If you have enough rogues in your party, it's not as bad because D&D you can generally say, well, there's like 10 more monsters in the next room. It's not bad unless it happens literally every time. It can suck a bit when your wizard bad guy dies, but generally there'll be still something interesting to happen in your typical dungeon or scenario, what have you. But like one place I saw it happen a lot is Savage Worlds, where if people don't know Savage Worlds, it has essentially you roll a damage roll versus an enemy's toughness. An important enemy will have bennies to try to mitigate damage based on your success levels. You'll notice it happening a lot where right before a enemy is going to do something big, a player you weren't expecting will just roll a massive roll because of exploding dice, and you're facing down the barrel of this enemy being maybe not knocked out or just reduced to like -2 wounds, putting penalties to everything they do, and all of a sudden you can't roll a soak to save your life. And you look down this limited pile of bennies. It's like, do I keep trying to spend all these bennies on say this guy, or does that feel a bit cheap? In one sense, it's not a problem for your bad guys to inexplicably get bennied from every bullet that comes at them, because you have a stack of poker chips in front of you and you are spending them like crazy. So the players always have a view of, assuming you're at the table, I suppose, they always have a view of, oh yeah, now we are getting through this guy's defenses, we are wearing down. But sometimes the dice are just not on your side, and or a run of bad luck earlier or something, you end up with not a lot of resources there. You just can't roll, and you come down and just this one lucky roll from player, unlucky on your part, left you basically without a fight. And I mean, in some cases, you can say, well, that's the problem with the fight. You didn't set it up well enough to continue without this pivotal creature. But boss fights, or fights against cool characters, are like such a staple in fiction, and particularly of the pulp fiction that Savage Worlds is trying to emulate. It's very hard to avoid falling into a situation where, yeah, there's one big character in the middle of the enemy formation, and it doesn't feel bad to be. It doesn't feel that particularly great to be constantly saying, "Well, yes, you have a super boss character, but also they're in cover, and they have like 3 bodyguards next to them, and they have sniper support or something." You don't want to feel it set up too contrived, because are you yeah, I guess it's a question of like how much character design should be going in to every fight, and like not everyone is infinite prep time. So, and again, a lot of combat characters will be pseudo spontaneous. You just, things will work out in a certain way where a NPC that you thought was going to be one place is going to be another place, or the player's going to stumble across them at a time we weren't expecting. So you don't always have perfect encounter design capability.
Yeah, no, like you also can't anticipate how parties will be. You can't always anticipate how parties will be arranged. Like your example of assumptions about an old school adventure which could have been written decades before you played it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm using a modern OSR game, Worlds That Number, but it has very different assumptions about how much magical output a typical spellcaster will have compared to D&D, where there was a sort of vague understanding that by level 7, the players would move heaven and earth to have enough resources to take on most situations, whereas this is more explicitly Vancian, for like as in the fiction of Jack Vance, where the protagonist's resources are more limited and the things they're fighting are a bit less expected. So while I'd say the party is relatively well equipped, they don't have a wand of fireballs is something they aren't going to just find on a treasure table somewhere. It's going to depend on what they find in the dungeons, and again, there's also the older editions assumed that they would be scraping the dungeon for all kinds of magical goodies or trading them with their NPCs or something. But that generally hasn't happened as much in this game. So
Yeah, no, there wouldn't be many multiple adventuring parties who you could, oh yeah, like you've such and such, we've such and such, let's swap.
yeah, like these are things I could have changed as we're going through the game, but I didn't foresee this particular room of trolls as something that I needed to, dangle a wand of fireballs in front of them 10 sessions ago.
Yeah, like the GMs are not in fact omniscient.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to go into advice on this, I guess planning ahead is always good, but all planning has limits. So it does pay to go ahead and just try to check ahead to see, to just think through a given encounter, say, is this going to be a problem? As a GM, possibly you should be reviewing your players' character sheets every level or two just to say, well, where do we actually stand? As opposed to finding out mid combat, oh, they have nothing to deal with this monster, or they have so many solutions to this monster, there was no point in even bringing it up. If you're using, and this is the thing, is that if you're using pre-arranged modules, do a sanity check on what's the most likely way to they're going to go. There's only so much that you can do. Like the dungeon I'm running them through has got so many different ways through it that I didn't feel there was any real way to predict which monsters they were going to run into. Which now that they're 4 levels deep in the dungeon, I say, oh wait, there's actually a very obvious main path through this dungeon that I just didn't notice before. And they managed to basically take that one, and it takes them right past the troll room. Huh? To think about that.
Well, they don't have to explore the entire dungeon. They don't have to clear out every room.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's another thing is you should be checking the assumptions of your game to make sure that you're all on board with it, and you're not falling into a situation which the game designer could not have anticipated, or scenario writer, or what have you. For your self design issues where you set things up yourself, it does really help to. You don't have to like prep for every eventuality. That way lies madness, obviously, but it does help to know your situation and know what your characters are doing, what they're about, what their limits are, so that if you do, you end up with the Dark Lord gets shot in the face with an arrow and keels over dead. What are the orcs and the ghouls going to do about it? I guess part of the thing about frustration is it's a feeling, and you can't completely control your feelings, obviously, but you can control how you react to them. So, there's a certain level of take your lumps, but also steel yourself against the situation and see what you can do about it. we all feel the DM process when you're in the middle of, your 5 rounds of your combat and you're realizing, oh, wait, this is going to be slog, or, oh, no, this is all going to fall apart in 2 seconds, and, an evening's content is going to last 10 minutes. When you're in that situation, you can't refer back to mechanics, or not only to a certain extent can you refer back to, oh, the mechanics are designed this particular way. It's not what's kind of annoying, or oh, the mechanics of this particular, they set up the scenarios a certain way, so can't really change it. If the table's getting frustrated at a certain scenario or something, that's something you're going to have to work with the table to solve. If it's you in particular is getting frustrated, then the thing that needs to be designed around is you. If you're sad that your bosses are failing so badly, you're getting ganked all the time, you're probably going to have to change your approach, make less boss centric thing, more more golems that go crazy when their wizard is killed.
Minions are good. Soak up some hits.
Minions, lieutenants, two big ogre brothers swinging the same axe, as opposed to having, all your eggs in one basket. Think about, like, you're going to have some boss fights, and some of them are going to go anticlimactically. Although the players might be very happy that they did not have to fight Gargon, the Death Toucher. So it's going to be about managing the feelings both that you have and that your table have. And again, you can spread the load. You're not alone in this table.
Yeah, absolutely. If in doubt, you can change things.
Yeah, you can change things, and you're going to get these frustrating moments. The main thing is getting through them and then getting on to what you love. As I said, there was a happy ending to my Room Full of Trolls scenario where they had a wonderful conversation and light beating session with a fire giant and convinced him to basically lock the trolls in their room, sneak past and get into their objective and save their dashing buddy. And that all went well in the end. So, when you're deep in the throes of, oh, this is such annoying, or, oh, they killed him so easily, like,
There might be payoff.
yeah, I think you can very easily make the best of it. Like, it's frustrating in the moment, but you can get through that moment. You can then work the payoff. And I do think, like, one of the big things is, like, after the troll fight, that was pretty much the end of the session. So then I had next week to go and come back into a much more dynamic thing with, Fire Giant and a Succubus and a Hellhound wrangling. And
It does sound more interested than grindiness, like.
yeah, yeah. So don't lose hope, as I guess what I've said. Things like, you go and get a solution. You might just need 10 minutes to think on it, or you might need a week between sessions. You say this, don't be afraid if you absolutely are driven up a wall or thing. It's never terribly bad to end the session a little bit early, so that you can have a week or whatever to prep the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been thrown for a loop here. Need to work on it. It's always a valid reason.
Yeah. Like telling your players, oh, I need a bit to figure out this next part. It's not going to kill the magic. They understand. They're reasonable folk.
Yes, reasonable.
Well, to an extent. And again, you can look at how you like if these things are happening constantly and they're really starting to get to you. Then you can take a look at what about your running style is causing. Maybe,
Maybe it's a mismatch.
yeah, there's a mismatch somewhere. Maybe it's your players' fighting style where they do not particularly want to, think outside the box, and they do want to just roll dice and kill goblins.
Mhm.
Maybe it's that you're too over reliant on big single bosses, and it, your scenarios fall apart if you don't have one, or it gets killed in round one, or if this is constantly happening, or maybe it's just mechanics. You're a system that encourages either really grindy or really unsatisfying combat. Maybe you need house rules, or maybe you need to change systems. All these are possible, but it's the willingness to look into it and think, oh, try this, try this. Try a few different things and see.
Well, encourage players to try things as well. Like, is it maybe the problem isn't what you're doing; it's the approach.
Yeah. Feed your players with, again, it's not illegal to hint at your players that maybe they can run off and find a scroll of fireball somewhere else before going, through this room.
Or, or many flasks of oil in a torch.
Yeah, exactly. Oh god, they find it all. They're finding my game is going to get very interesting very quickly.
Yeah, so the troll population is falling rapidly. Who knew?
Funny that. Funny that. Well, yes, if you found us frustrating or would like some exploits so that you can get past this podcast, you could probably find it on our Discord. There's a lot of very important people, very, very cognizant of the mechanics of our podcast and how to exploit it. Or you can hit us up on our other social media and see all the other wonderful and annoying things we have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. But for now, this party is over.
Thanks for listening to The Adventure Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventuringPTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike version 3 license.